Today we're going to be talking about Newton's Law of Motion, but don't worry, it's not going to be boring because we're going to apply this to productivity. What's up, friends? Welcome to The Beautiful Mess, where we talk about tools and tactics to improve your life. I'm your host, Paul Didis, a YouTuber, podcaster, and content creator, and today I'm going to be applying one of these laws, and I'm just going to say I've started this podcast a couple times and I messed up, and now I'm just going to go with it. So it's going to be real. It's going to be raw. It's going to be the beautiful mess. That's what we're here for. And it's more important to get started on something than to get stuck. And so I'm going to apply this. And so forgive me if this is raw and real, but we're just going to go with it. Okay. Yeah. So what are we talking about today? So the other day I was trying to think of like what I wanted to talk about on the podcast. And there was a messy thing that happened. Basically, I got the good old letter from the HOA. Don't worry, I love my HOA. The people here are wonderful. But, it's always intimidating when you get that letter. There was just some yard work that I had kind of put off, like any person might do. Maybe you're not that person, but, it's just like trimming the hedges, kind of just like taking care of like the beds of like, where the weeds can grow in between the bushes and stuff. So like it just like crept up, and then all of a sudden, you get that letter. But what I realized was that like kind of lit a flame underneath me, because all of a sudden my focus and attention to my lawn all of a sudden like skyrocketed. Like it was like once a week, mow the lawn, do some like little things here and there. All of a sudden it became my like singular focus. And let me tell you, when you have a motivator and like attention to one thing, you can really go far in life. So it was funny. I was thinking about that. And then my wife sent me this article from James Clear called The Physics of Productivity, Newton's Law of Getting Stuff Done. And I'll be sure to leave a link in the description of this episode so you can check it out for your own. But I just thought it was funny because like I was just basically thinking about this idea that like, objects in motion tend to stay in motion, whereas like those that at rest tend to stay at rest. And so all of a sudden, you receive this message, let's just say from your HOA, that you need to get this done, like the lawn done. And you're like, oh, that now becomes priority number one. I'm going to get that done. And so like you can apply this to other areas of your life. And, think about it. It's like all of a sudden your priorities change when, maybe there's a medical emergency. We've had a couple visits to the doctor recently, and you just never know when those will pop up. And so life can be messy, but all of a sudden you have that intensity, that focus. And so what I want to share with you is some ideas for you to get that intensity and focus for just like everyday kind of things, those things that you should be working on or having that same kind of intensity and focus. But maybe you're getting distracted. Maybe you're getting pulled in many different directions. So I think this is a good, good episode for you if you're trying to get stuff done and you feel like you're losing like the energy. So first off, the first principle that we're going to be kind of talking about, or Newton's first law of productivity, as James Clear puts it, that objects in motions tend to stay in motion, objects at rest tend to stay at rest. And I think to overcome like the procrastination that you like encounter, what he recommends is try to find the 2-minute thing that you can start doing. Like, don't think of it as like a 10-minute thing, something that it takes forever to get started. Think about it on a small level. What can you do in 2 minutes or less that will kickstart things? If you're going out running, putting on your running shoes. If you're, going to start a podcast like I just did, again, this is like a perfect example of it. I just decided like, hey, I've tried to get this intro perfect and it wasn't going perfect. So I'm just going to roll with whatever comes, happens. for better or for worse for you. But basically that idea that, just get the ball rolling, because once you get in the motion, once you start getting like in the zone, you'll tend to keep at things. You'll tend to keep heading in the right direction. And then the second law of not thermodynamics. I don't know. I think like it was in my head that it might have been thermodynamics that had this objects at rest. It's law of motion. So if I accidentally say thermodynamics, that's why. But the second law of motion, force equals mass times acceleration. And so how you can apply this one to productivity, basically, James Clear puts it this way: if you want to be productive, it's not merely about how hard you work, the magnitude, it's also about where that work is applied, the direction. This is true of big life decisions and small daily decisions. So, like I said, with the idea of just like getting your lawn done, when you receive that letter from the HOA kind of deal, that can be applied in many different other situations where all of a sudden you get that, and then you all of a sudden have this like focus, like you're like really determined in the next couple of days, I'm going to just like figure this out. I'm going to like get it done. And so there's like the difference of like the magnitude, the amount of force that you put into something, and then also the direction. So like if you're going in many different directions, all of a sudden your magnitude kind of gets like, it dwindles a little bit. But if you can apply the two at the same time, where your force and your like your efforts, like the time that you put in, the focus is on one thing, you're going to go a lot further. And that's exactly what happened to me with my lawn. It was like all of a sudden I could get it all done. I was like, okay, I need to buy these tools in order to get this done. I need to, learn how to do this, that, and the other. And, it's amazing how like that kind of focus and determination can happen when you have that little fire lit under you. And so, yeah, he says, like, to put it simply, if you only have a certain amount of force to provide to your work, and where you place that force is just as important as how hard you work. So, you could drink a lot of coffee, stay up all night, work super hard, but if your direction is not, focused in the right way, you could be hindering yourself in the long term. And then let's get to the third law of productivity, Newton's law of productivity. Little did he know that he was writing the laws of productivity here. But like basically the third law of motion, when one body exerts a force on a second body, the second body simultaneously exerts a force equal in magnitude and opposite in direction on the first body, i.e. equal and opposite forces. So I guess like what it comes down to is that like you also have to take into consideration like the things that take away from you being productive. What are those distractions? Is it your phone? Because like you could be super diligent at some points to like getting that one thing done, but all of a sudden if you're being pulled in another direction, you're going to be a lot less effective than you could be if you kind of remove the obstacles. If you take the time to kind of identify what those obstacles are. And this actually reminds me of Javier from the Finisher's Secrets. Like he has this journal that he makes, but one of the ideas that he presented in a recent, like they got a Facebook group, and like they basically had I guess like a Facebook Live kind of thing. And he talked about how you want to identify your obstacles and then kind of flip it and see like what solutions can you provide for those obstacles. So like what's going to prevent you from earning $10,000 in like a period amount of time or whatever it is. That was one example I think they gave, but it's like you if you can identify what's keeping you from your goal, and then on the flip side, identify the solutions that it's going to like allow you to overcome it, it's going to be much better off than if you just simply, try to get something done without considering what the obstacles would be. I thought that was really fascinating. And he's been very successful with his journal company. And I'm excited to see what else comes from the Finisher Secrets. But it's been really interesting. So if we want to, James Clear says, if we want to become more effective and more productive, then we have two choices. The first option is to add more productive force. So again, it's like you're aiming in one direction, you're, like powered through it kind of thing. You gut it out, drink another cup of coffee, work harder. That kind of thing, like the pump you up kind of feeling. But it's all an effort to increase your productive force and overpower the unproductive forces we face. So, and he says, obviously, you can only do this for so long before you burn out. But for a brief moment, the power through it strategy can work well. Brief moment. Yeah. The second option is to eliminate the opposing forces. Again, like the obstacles in your way. What can you do to remove those so that you can get going on your projects or whatever it is that you want to be doing? So like he lists out, simplify your life, learn how to say no, and change your environment. Reduce the number of responsibilities that you take on. Otherwise, eliminate the forces that are holding you back. It's again, like once you identify those things that are keeping you from being productive, from accomplishing your goals, like all of a sudden the path becomes clear. So like maybe it's getting started on something and you realize that it takes you forever just to sit down and start. And that's where like adjusting your environment can be really helpful. So for me, what I've done is I've made it super easy for me to sit down and record this podcast. It's just a matter of me turning on a couple things, but I've made it as simple as possible. I even have Alexa, now she's listening in. But basically, I can just say that I'm not going to say her name because she will talk to me. But turn on the light type of thing. And all of a sudden my light's on. And then I've got like a folder that I can just copy. Like it's a template folder that I have with all like the project files in there. Just paste that. And that way there's a lot less like guesswork every time I go to record an episode. So thinking about those things that you can make just like a rhythmic thing in your life, where there's less friction. Again, it's like if you can reduce the amount of friction from you sitting down and hitting record, you're going to be more likely to actually get it done. And again, you can apply these principles to your life. So to kind of like sum up the 3 Newton's law of productivity. So he puts it this way. James Clear, he puts it this way. So 1, objects in motion tend to stay in motion. So find a way to get started in 2 minutes or less. And then number 2, it's not just about working hard. It's also about working on the right things. You have a limited amount of force and where you apply it matters. And then number 3, your productivity is a balance of opposing forces. If you want to be more productive, you can either power through the barriers or remove the opposing forces. The second option seems to be less stressful. So keep that in mind if you're trying to get something done. Actually, the last one makes me think of this is I've been having, with mowing the lawn, I had this like battery powered mower and it's great. It's great. I love battery powered mowers instead of having to deal with spark plugs and gasoline and all that fun stuff. However, I bought this mower for my house in Arizona where there was like a smaller piece of land and there wasn't as much. And so as time goes on, the battery diminishes in power. And so like, I'll be like pushing along and it would just stop. It's like, I'm done. I'll check out. And so, it's like I could just try to keep going, or I could realize that there's opposing force at me that's preventing me from getting going, the battery. It might be worth buying another battery or finding another way of reducing that friction so that when I go to mow the lawn, I'm not fighting the lawn. It's more frictionless because I have a solution to that problem. Because that keeps me back from being able to mow the whole, like I usually have to break up the front yard and the backyard. And so recently with this, change of the HOA letter, like all of a sudden, like I was like, okay, it's time. I need to buy another battery to get this done. Because otherwise, you spend a lot of time and energy just trying to get going because of the limitations of what your tool that kind of creates this opposing force against you, even though it's supposed to be helping you. Keep that in mind. What is it in your life that's keeping you from going? And maybe it's actually a good thing. Like, for example, being a productivity person, like I love productivity tools, but what I've realized is that they can get in the way. And my good buddy Spencer and I, like we talk about these kind of things. And I think it was like, I was talking about like, oh, I'm having a hard time like deciding like which project management tool to use. And he's like, the problem is like often we can get in this mindset of like feeling like you're productive, like you're checking off the boxes. But it might not necessarily mean that you're like being productive. So like me, looking into those productivity tools could have been a distraction, the taking away from actually doing what needs to be done. So just keep that in mind. Like, is there something in my life that's actually preventing me from accomplishing the goals, even if it's something that's, supposed to be helping, like, because it could be hindering. So simplifying your life and removing the excess, be a minimalist with your, focus and attention. I love this imagery that was provided in, what's his name? Greg McKeown's book, Essentialism, where there's like a circle and there's like all these arrows going out from it. And that's like when you're trying to move in many different directions, and you lack the focus. And like we heard in the law of motion by Newton, is that like when you have that focus, that direction, and you have that effort lined up, you're going to go much further. You're going to get a lot more done than if you like have this like shotgun approach to life. It's really about identifying what are your values and how you can use that to improve your life and to move in the right direction. Because again, it's one thing to be efficient. It's another thing to be effective, because being efficient might mean that you're running at 100 miles per hour. But if you're driving 100 miles per hour in the wrong direction, that doesn't help, because you're going to have to just backtrack. And it would have been better that you were driving 50 miles, half the speed, in the right direction. So just keep that in mind. And if you want to be part of our messy fam, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, all that fun stuff, wherever you listen to podcasts. And until next time, my friends, stay messy.